Okay, we're reading.
Thank you.
Okay, are you ready? Thank you, Joe. Friday, August 21st, 1942. Dear Kitty, the entrance to our hiding place has now been properly concealed. Mr. Kraler thought it would be better to put a cupboard in front of our door because a lot of houses are being searched for hidden bicycles. But of course it had to be a movable cupboard that can open like a door. So cupboard here is like a bookshelf. Mr. Vauzin made the whole thing. We had already let him into the secret, and he can't do enough to help. If we want to go downstairs, we have to first bend down and then jump, because the step is gone. The first 3 days, we were all going about with masses of lumps in our foreheads, because we all knocked ourselves against the doorway. Now we have nailed a cloth filled with wood against the top of the door. Let's see if that helps. Oh, she probably had a bad headache. I'm not working much at the present. I'm giving myself holiday until September. Then Daddy is going to give me lessons. It's shocking how much I've forgotten already. There's this little change in our life. Mr. Van Daan and I usually manage to upset each other. It's just the opposite with Margot, whom he likes very much. Mummy sometimes treats me like a baby, which I can't bear. Otherwise, things are going better. I still don't like Peter anymore. He's so boring. He flops lazily on his bed half the time, does a bit of carpentry, and then goes back for another snooze. What a fool! It's lovely weather, and in spite of everything, we make the most we can of it by lying on camp bed in the attic, where the sun shines through the open window. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, September 2nd, 1942. Dear Kitty, Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan have had a terrific quarrel. I've never seen anything quite like it before. Mummy and Daddy would never dream of shouting at each other. The cause was so trivial that the whole thing was a pure waste of breath. But still, everyone to his own liking. Naturally, it is very unpleasant for Peter, who has to stand by. No one takes him seriously. He's so frightfully touchy and lazy. Yesterday, he was badly upset because a phenomenon of nature disappeared just as quickly as it had come. Today, he's going about with a scarf on. He has a stiff neck. In addition, my lord complains of lumbago. Pains around his heart, his kidney, his lungs are not unusual either, but he is real hypochondria. That's a word for such people, isn't it? It's not all honey between Mummy and Mrs. Van Daan. There's plenty of cause for unpleasantries. To give a small example, I will tell you that Mrs. Van Daan has taken all 3 of her sheets out of the common linen cupboard. She takes it for granted that Mummy's sheets will do for all of us. But it will be a nasty surprise for her when she finds that Mummy has followed her good example. Also, she is thoroughly piqued that dinner service, and not ours, is in use. She is always trying to find out where we can actually put our plates. They are closer than she thinks. They're in a cardboard box behind a lot of junk in the attic. Our plates are ungettable as long as we are here. And a good thing, too. I always have bad luck. I smashed one of Mrs. Van Daan's soup plates into 1,000 pieces yesterday. Woo! She cried angrily. Could you be more careful for once? That's the last one I've got! Mr. Van Daan, careful for once. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Van Daan is all sugar to me nowadays. Long may it last. Mummy gave me another frightful sermon this morning. I can't bear them. Our ideas are completely opposite. Daddy for 5 minutes on end. Last week we had a little interruption in our monotonous life. It was over a book about women and Peter. First, I must tell you that Margot and Peter are allowed to read nearly all the books that Mr. Kufius lends us. But the grown-ups held back this particular book on the subject of women. Peter's curiosity was aroused at once. Why is it the two of them were not allowed to read in this book? He got a hold of the book on the sly, while his mother was downstairs talking, and disappeared with his booty in the attic. All went well for a few days. His mother knew what he was doing, but didn't tell tales until Father found out. He was very angry and took the book away and thought that would finish the whole business. However, he had not allowed for his son's curiosity, which waxed rather than waned because of his father's attitude. Peter, determined to finish it, thought of a way to get a hold of this enthralling book. In the meantime, Mrs. Van Daan had asked Mummy what she thought about it. Mummy thought this particular book was not suitable for Margot, but she saw no harm in letting her read most books. There's a great difference, Miss Van Daan, said Mummy, between Margot and Peter. In the first place, Margot's a girl, and girls are always more grown up than boys. Secondly, Margot has read quite a lot of serious books, and does not go in search of things that are forbidden to her. And thirdly, Margot is far more developed and intelligent, shown by the fact of her being in the 4th form at school. Ooh. Miss Van Daan agreed, but still thought it was wrong in principle to let children read books which were written for grown-ups. In the meantime, Peter had found time day when no one bothered him or the book. 7:30 in the evening. Then everyone was in the private office listening to the radio. That's when he took his treasure to the attic again. He should have been downstairs again by 8:30, but because the book was so thrilling, he forgot the time was just coming downstairs. And his father came into the room. You can imagine the consequences. With a slap and a snatch, the book lay on the table and Peter was in the attic. That's how matters stood. And as we sat down to table, Peter stayed upstairs. No one bothered about him and had to go to bed without any supper. We went on with the meal, chattering gaily, and when suddenly we heard a piercing whistle, we all stopped eating and looked with pale, changed faces from one to another. Then we heard Peter's voice calling down the chimney. I say, I'm not coming down anyway! Mr. Van Daan sprang to his feet. His napkin fell to the floor, and scarlet in the face, he shouted, I've had enough of this! Daddy took his arm, afraid of what might happen, and the two of them went together to the attic. After a good deal of resistance and stamping, Peter landed up in his room with the door closed, and we went on eating. Mrs. Van Daan wanted to save one slice of bread for the dear boy, but his father stood firm. If he doesn't apologize soon, he will have to sleep in the attic. Loud protests from the rest of us, as we thought missing supper was quite enough punishment. Besides, Peter might catch a cold, and we couldn't call a doctor. Peter did not apologize. He was already in the attic. Mr. Van Daan did nothing more about it, but I noticed the next morning that Peter's bed had been slept in. Peter was back in the attic at 7 o'clock, but Daddy managed with a few friendly words to persuade him to come down again. Sour faces and obstinate silences for 3 days. Then, and everything went smoothly once more. Yours, Anne. Monday, September 21st, 1942. Dear Kitty, today I'm going to tell you our general news. Mrs. Van Daan is unbearable. I get nothing but blow-ups from her, my continuous chatter. She is always pestering us in some way or another. This is the latest. She doesn't want to wash up the pans if there is fragments left instead of putting it into the glass dish. We've always done until now. She leaves it in the pan to go bad. After the next meal, Margot sometimes has about 7 pans to wash up. And then Madame says, well, well, Margot, you have a lot to do. I'm busy with Daddy working out his family tree. As we go along, he tells me bits about everyone. It's terribly interesting. Mr. Kufius brings a few special books for me every other week. I'm thrilled with the Jupiter Hole series. I've enjoyed the whole Sissy Van Marksville very much. And I've read Hens 4 times, and I still laugh about some of the ludicrous situations that arise. Term time has begun again. I'm working hard at my French to manage to pump in 5 irregular verbs per day. Peter sighs and groans over his English. A few school books have just arrived. We have good stock of exercise books, pencils, rubbers, and labels, as I brought these with me. I sometimes listened to the Dutch news from London, heard Prince Bernhard recently. He said that Princess Juliana is expecting a baby next January. I think it's lovely. It surprises the others that I should be so keen on the royal family. I was being discussed and they decided that I'm not completely stupid after all, which had the effect of making me work extra hard the next day. I certainly don't want to still be in the first form when I'm 14 or 15. Also, the fact that I'm hardly allowed to read any decent books was mentioned. Mummy is reading her... These are all German names. Now, which I'm not allowed, Margot is. First, I must be more developed like my talented sister. Then we talk about my ignorance of philosophy and psychology, about which I know nothing. Perhaps by next year I shall be wiser. I looked up these difficult words quickly. I have just woken up to the disturbing fact I have 1 long-sleeve dress and 3 cardigans for winter. I've received permission from Daddy to knit a jumper of white sheep's wool. It's not very nice wool, but as long as it's warm, that's all that matters. We have some clothes deposited with friends, but unfortunately we should not see them until after the war. That is, if they're still there then. I had just written something about Miss Van Daan when she came in. Slap! I closed the book. Hey, Anne, can't I just have a look? I'm afraid not. Just the last page, then. No, I'm sorry. Naturally, it gave me a frightful shock because there was an unflattering description of her on this particular page. Yours, Anne.